This episode is scripted, narrated, recorded and edited by Newell Fisher, with script assistance by John Ruths. Hello, and welcome to the Watership Down podcast episode 66, in which we will be analysing section 8 of the 1978 film, The Rat Attack and the Stranger. First of all, one small piece of barrowkeeping. The review by Zoe that I read out last week turns out to have been written by a listener by the name of Jamie Clubb. For some reason, Apple Podcasts had allocated him the name Zoe. He isn't sure why. Anyway, I'm happy to correct this. He also adds how grateful he is to everyone else who has helped me with the podcast, as am I, and I'm always glad to have an opportunity to repeat this. So, on with the episode. This section covers from 21 minutes 20 to 26 minutes 10, and the equivalent chapters from the book are chapters 10, The Road and the Common, 11, Hard Going, and 12, The Stranger in the Field. This is a long section with a lot of dialogue, and I was tempted to shorten it, but decided against on balance. It consists of two natural episodes from the film, such episodes tending to end with musical interludes. The first of these has very little dialogue and is the shorter of the two at about 2 minutes. In the book, there is a long section of the journey to Watership Down that we only hear about in passing. This is the part from the departure of the Warren of the Snares to the arrival at the foot of Watership Down. Part of the description of that journey, at the start of Chapter 18, Watership Down, describes how they were attacked by rats in an isolated barn near Ecchinswell. That episode is transplanted to earlier in the plot in the film and seems to occupy the part of their journey that in the book is taken up with the terrible overnight journey over Newtown Common, and instead of a barn, it takes place in an abandoned church. The nearest church to Newtown Common is a spired one by the name of St Mary the Virgin with St John the Baptist, which is probably the one the churchyard of which the rabbits pass through in Chapter 10, The Road and the Common, in the book, before reaching the common. I had always assumed that this is the church that appears in the opening titles of the film at 4:45, but that church is one with a tower, not a spire. Add to that the following episode is going to take place in an abandoned church, which, as far as I am aware, has not existed in that area in the last century, and you have further evidence that the geography of the area Watership Down is set in is what is being abandoned by the 1978 film. Following the shocking death of Violet, 2 more zooming shots of backgrounds establish the rabbit's journey continuing as the skies darken. The second of these is punctuated with the sound of a gunshot as we see barbed wire. The zoom pauses for a moment, implying the nervousness of the group as they continue on. Next, we see the churchyard, as Blackberry, Hazel and Bigwig discuss resting there. Bigwig is cautious, as it is a man place, but Hazel points out there are none there now. The next shot is a pan as the tired group are seen cautiously approaching an entrance to the church. Hazel takes the lead, looking inside first. In the following shot of the group going inside, Bigwig disappears for a frame in an animation error picked up by fans of the film, probably once it became available on DVD. The exhausted rabbits enter the church and we see Bigwig practically collapse into sleep away from the rest of the group. The next shot is an effective silent zoom out from above, during which the only human face in the film appears at the right, that of a statue. This implied threat is immediately punctuated by the simultaneous appearance of 2 rats at either side of shot, along with a sudden loud, harsh squeaking. It is a very well shot, shocking moment. A group of 4 rats make their way down to the floor, accompanied by a tense musical theme. One of them launches an attack at the sleeping Bigwig, who is separate from the rest of the group and immediately wakes up, swinging the rat around in the air by his ear, which it has latched onto with its teeth. This has never looked very realistic to me. Could a rabbit's ear stand up to such punishment? And then, the rest of the rabbits having immediately woken up, the scene strangely descends into farce, with percussion-based music to match. Bigwig gets the rat off his ear. It lands by a wooden stake, the impact wobbling the statue we saw moments before. In the panic, Pipkin knocks over a shovel which scatters the rats. Then an owl notices what's happening. We get an aerial shot of chaos ensuing, with rats and rabbits running everywhere. More rats arrive. Two of the rabbits exit the church through a narrow gap in panic. Dandelion kicks a rat away, who lands on a pot which smashes on the floor below, scattering several rats. The owl decides the time has come to take flight. This could mean dinner is served, but would it not have attacked already if it were present? As a nocturnal animal, it would hardly have been asleep. The owl swoops over the whole scene. Fiver ducks out of its way just in time. It then heads towards the rats. By this time the rabbits have all got outside, and the calmer music have transitioned to another episode as the story begins. This episode is a strange replacement for the terrible journey across the common. Possibly the filmmakers decided a bit of excitement and comic relief was necessary at this point. It seems almost designed to keep any children watching the film happy, and is not really in keeping with the prevailing atmosphere at this point in the story. The only hint of the journey across the common comes now, as rain and thunder sets in during the 3 transitional shots, and we see the rabbits arrive under a tree. This is where what must be one of the longest conversations in the whole film takes place. Definitely one of the longest group conversations. Pipkin wonders what is going on back home, and mentions when they used to live in cosy burrows. His thoughts on being pressed up against warm bodies are ended with a sneeze. Silver, next to him, nods in agreement. Dandelion says to Hazel it can't go on like this. Silver agrees that things are getting worse and worse the further they go on. He pointedly asks Hazel where they are going. Hazel reassures him that it won't be much longer, then they can all rest. Silver asks how much longer. Pipkin says they never should have left, and then, shockingly, Blackberry, of all rabbits, asks what if Fiver was wrong. Pipkin says he wants to go back and find out. At this point, Hazel intervenes and points out all they've been through, and Bigwig angrily makes the practical point that having injured an Owsla officer, a captain no less, they will probably be killed if they go back. Now Fiver makes his contribution, saying they must go on until they reach the hills, and slipping into a fearful trance as he seems to sense the consequences of not doing so, consequences that are about to start playing out. The whites of his eyes become frighteningly prominent as he looks about him and hops in a circle in terror, saying those that go back will not be safe. Eventually he is unable to even speak as he trembles in a seemingly briefly catatonic state. Ignoring Fiver, Silver now makes a direct allegation towards Hazel that he does not know where they are going. In doing so, he takes on the role of Acorn, Speedwell and Hawkbit in the book, who question Hazel's leadership as a group before Bigwig angrily and violently intervenes, biting Hawkbit. With those characters missing here, the rebellion takes in normally completely loyal Pipkin as well as Blackberry and Dandelion. Bigwig begins his angry intervention, but is rapidly interrupted by Blackberry's urgent stamping of an alarm. A strange rabbit has suddenly appeared and is standing a few yards away. Hazel and Bigwig address him. He says it looks like they've come a long way, in an offhand manner. In the book he seems quite likeable at this point, but here his portrayal and Denholm Elliott's voice seem to suggest a slyness that is instantly unpleasant. To save time, it seems that we, the audience, are being told up front that something is really not right here, where in the book this is revealed more slowly. Hazel asks if he lives here. He says he does, and that this is their warren. Hazel says they need to stay here for a while, as Blackberry and Dandelion join them. In the book, the rain is only threatening to start when this encounter happens, and it is significantly Fiver who raises the alarm. Also, there is a touching of noses between Hazel and the stranger before they speak. But to an English audience, that would have looked far too familiar for a rabbit with this kind of character, I guess, so here they stay apart. The stranger says he supposed they would be staying, but there are not enough of them to live comfortably on their own. Bigwig takes his usual role by pointing out that there are enough of them to protect themselves. He goes up to the stranger and acts more like you would expect the stranger to in this situation, asking who he is and what he wants. In the book, it is Hazel who gives the initial warning about protecting themselves, and Bigwig is a lot calmer overall. The stranger announces himself as Cowslip and says he doesn't want anything. Pipkin asks about the others, which produces a pointed reassurance that they have plenty of empty burrows. We briefly see Fiver react to this with fear, having emerged from his trance. Cowslip excuses himself as he hates the rain and lollops away with a curiously leisurely run to a nearby hole. Pipkin comments on the funny smell, while Fiver immediately says they should have nothing to do with Cowslip or his warren. Silver laconically comments that it might be drier in the warren, which seems a certainty. In fact, in the film, it seems to be the already present rain that largely decides things. Pipkin asks what they will think of them if they don't go to the warren, to which Dandelion replies they will think they are afraid. Bigwig immediately reacts angrily to the mere suggestion. Blackberry says Cowslip seems friendly, but wonders what they have to gain by asking them to join their warren. Bigwig, still agitated, says they can't just sit out there like fools, eliciting an angry look from Fiver, and tells everyone to come with him to the warren. At this moment, the authority of Hazel seems fairly undermined, unlike in the book, where reaching the other side of the common restores his authority, despite Bigwig's declaration in the lost paragraph. Left behind, on their own, Fiver reminds Hazel that he knows Fiver is right about such things, despite the rest of them thinking he is mad, but he still isn't listening. This seems like truncated conversation taken to an extreme, as no one in the group has actually said as much. Proving him correct, Hazel follows the rest of the group to the warren and urges Fiver to join him. Reluctantly, Fiver follows Hazel into the warren. Comparison with the book. The loss of the entire episode of crossing the common does not especially change the nature of the journey the rabbits take to this new warren, as we do see them clearly exhausted after the loss of Violet, and the rain after they escape the rat attack clearly lowers their morale even further. However, the comedic way in which the inserted rat attack episode is dealt with, as well as the loss of the moment of triumph as they reach the other side of the common in better weather, does detract a great deal from Hazel's authority as leader in a way that is unfortunate. His authority, in the face of a slightly more aggressive Bigwig at this point than in the book, will be restored, just a bit later in the narrative. But it has been said that overall Hazel's leadership is shown to less effect in the film, and this episode is definitely an example of that, where he is reduced to following the crowd rather than leading them to the new warren after consulting with them. But, on the other hand, his attitude towards Fiver at this point is not clearly stated, while in the book we learn how low his opinion of his brother is becoming. In either case, we are now set up for the arrival at Cowslip's warren, and whatever it holds. Next time, the rabbits enter Cowslip's warren. What will they find there?